Isn't this a beautiful orchid? In this video, I'm going to have a close look at this plant and see what do we have to do with it. I think it's time for a little maintenance, but I haven't looked inside the pot yet, so I'm not sure. So I think we'll learn a lot just by having a closer look at the plant. Well, let me give you a little history about this plant. My wife received this as a gift 11 months ago. It was flowering like this, and it's been flowering like this ever since. This is one of the reasons that I just love orchids, particularly the smaller flowered ones. They'll flower 12 months of the year. In fact, I've had some of these small ones flower for 3 years straight without stopping. Now, the larger flowered ones don't flower quite so well, but even those flowers last 8 months. This is the container it came in. It's a very decorative pot, but the one thing I noticed right away was there were no drainage holes. I almost repotted it, but it was doing so well I really didn't want to touch it. There's 3 plants in here. That's one of the reasons there's so many flowers. The potting media is very small chunks of bark, so that's a lot better than the sphagnum moss. If this had been in sphagnum, I would have repotted it long ago. But I thought, you know what? It's in wood, so that's a good thing. If I water this very slightly, it should be all right with a pot without holes. So I did that as an experiment, and it worked really well. I just dribbled a little water on here once a week or so. But there's a lot of old stems. It's been working really hard for a year, so it's probably time to give it a rest. I also noticed that this one over here is starting to get wrinkly leaves. That's a sure sign that it's not getting enough water. So either I'm not watering enough, or it has a root problem. This is a really common problem online. People post pictures of their orchids. They have wrinkly leaves, and they say, what's wrong? And a whole bunch of people post, well, it's not getting enough water. You got to water more. But that may be the opposite of what the person has to do. Wrinkly leaves are a sign that the plant is not getting enough water. It does not mean you're not watering enough. In fact, if you water too much, you rot the roots, and the plant can't get any water, so it gets wrinkled leaves. The only way to tell if this is too dry or too wet is to get it out of the pot. Whenever I see pictures like that online, I want to post right away and say, get it out of the pot and show us what the roots look like. The roots tell you so much about the health of a plant. That's what I'm going to do here. This is coming out of the pot today. We're going to have a look at the root system, and we're going to make some decisions about how to proceed with this thing. I don't think there's any easy way to do this. I just have to dump it out. Well, there's a bad sign right away. Now, I did water this a couple days ago, but there's way too much water in this pot. That's a really good sign that this is overwatered. It's also a good reason why you shouldn't use a pot without holes. You never know how much water is in here. So there's the bottom of the pot, no holes whatsoever. So I'm not surprised at this. I expected that each orchid would be in its own little pot. The nursery gets them this way from the grower, and then they just put 3 of these in a decorative pot to sell it to you. Now the bark looks pretty good. As long as the bark is less than 2 years old, it's usually quite good. It hasn't started to rot or anything, so this is still good and could actually be reused if you wanted to, but I probably won't do that. One of the reasons is that the material is very tiny, and I like chunkier bark than this. There are a bunch of dead roots in here. Not surprising. There's a dead one, another dead one. Looks like all the roots that were hanging outside of these small pots have rotted. So this is very interesting. These plants were grown in small foam chunks, little cylinders, and then they were simply placed inside of here and some bark was added. These aren't very good for growing orchids. They just stay far too wet. Now, if you learn how to water them correctly, they're okay, but we really want to get rid of this. So now we have a big problem because the only way to get this off is to do a fair amount of damage to your roots. And as it turns out, the root system of these plants is not very good. This is the one that had the leaves that were the most wrinkled, and it has almost no good roots left. So what do you do with a plant like this? It's suffering. It's got a good set of leaves, very few roots, and it's still flowering like crazy. These flowers take a lot of moisture, but it can't get moisture from the roots. So the flowers are taking moisture from the leaves. It won't be too long before these will start dropping off because they can't get enough moisture. And then the plant will be in terrible shape and these leaves will get even more wrinkled looking. The solution here is really clear. We'll take these stakes off, and even though it hurts you, not the plant. Cut off these spikes as low as you can. Now I see a lot of people online saying, well, leave these spikes. As long as they're green, they might spike out, make a side branch, and so on. And that's quite true. And if you're going for lots and lots of flowers, that's great. But at some point, this plant needs a rest. It's been flowering for a year now, and boy, is it time for a rest. Cut these off as low as you can. Cut off all the dead roots, which is just about all of them. There's not much left down there. There is a good root here, and there's one over here that's not bad. Then you just pot this up, and the plant will be fine. It'll take a few months to recover, but it will be fine like this. I can see through the plastic container that the roots of these others are a little better. So you can see some nice roots here. So these haven't been quite as wet. But again, they have this foam center. So what I'm going to do with these two, take the foam off as carefully as I can, clean up the roots, cut off all the flowers, and repot them. It's a good thing I took this pot apart. It teaches us a valuable lesson. Don't use pots without holes in them. Now you're probably wondering, how am I going to repot this? This video right here will show you that. And if you want to keep your orchids flowering all year long, watch this video over here. Happy gardening.